Havard Wren would not have woken me for a war. He had let me sleep through two. So when his hand came down on my shoulder in the gray before dawn and he said, "Sire, there's a child at the gate," I was already reaching for my boots. "Hurt?" "No," he stopped there, which Havard never did. "She's turning herself in." I got the second boot on. "For what?" "She won't say it to me. She says she'll say it to you." He held the door. "She's been out there since the bells. We offered her the guardroom fire. She said prisoners don't get fires. The stairs of Ilverhame are cut from the mountain itself, and they hold the cold like a jar holds water. I went down them fast. Frost had come in the night and put a white fur on every stone, and out past the arch the orchard slopes fell away gray and glittering, 10,000 bare trees standing in rows like a patient army. My valley, my winter. Somewhere down there a smudge fire was going. I could smell the smoke before I could see the gate. The girl was standing in the middle of the gate road with her chin up. She was perhaps 6. She wore a coat made for someone 3 sizes larger, belted with what I am fairly sure was a bridle strap, and her boots had been stuffed with straw until they fit. I could see the ends of it sticking out at her ankles like a hedgehog's whiskers. Her cheeks were 2 red coins. In both hands, held out from her body the way you carry something you have already decided is evidence, was a bundle of sacking. 6 of my guards stood around her in a wide, useless ring. Not one of them had worked out what to do with her. Men who have held a bridge against Kessendrel, and a child had beaten them by standing still. I came out under the arch and stopped a few feet from her, and she looked all the way up at me. I am a large man. I know what my shape does at the top of a dark road, and I have never once found a way to make it smaller. I waited for her to break. She did not break. She swallowed, and then she said, in the loud, flat voice children use when they have practiced a sentence the whole way, "Are you the king of Ilverhame?" "I am." "Then I've come to be took." Behind her, one of my guards made a small sound and covered it with a cough. "Took," I said. "Took," she agreed. She thrust the sacking at me. Her hands were shaking and not with cold. "I stole it. It's yours. It's from your bees." I crouched. That helped. It always helps, and I never remember it in time. I opened the sacking on my knee there in the road with my whole gate watching. Inside was a broken comb of honey. Crown honey, the pale kind from the high hives at Ardenmoor, which is worth about 1/3 of nothing and belongs, technically, to me, in the way that the snow and the crows and the noise of the river also technically belong to me. It had been mangled. Half of it was gone. What was left was pressed with the marks of small fingers, and there were bits of straw and 1 feather in it, and it had frozen that way, sticky and ruined, and carried 9 miles. "I ate some," she said, "so you can't have it all back. I'm sorry. I'll be took for that too. I have sat in judgment for 20 years. I have had men lie to me with such artistry that I almost applauded. Nobody had ever handed me the evidence. What's your name?" "Pel Osaway." "Of Caldcho." She said the valley's name the way you say a thing you have been told to be proud of. Then she added very fast, "My mam's got the cough. Honey's good for the cough. Wara says honey's good for the cough. So I took it and I gave it her in hot water, and she slept all night without coughing once, and that's the good part, and this is the bad part." She lifted her chin higher. "So take me." Down the road a woman's voice said quietly, "Pell." I had not seen her. She was standing back at the edge of the light where the gate lantern gave out, half in the dark, and she had been letting the child do it, letting her finish it, the way you let someone finish a thing they have earned. She came forward now. She was 30 or a little more, and she had walked a long way. Her cloak was wool gone black at the hem with wet, and the frost had made a gray crust of her hood's edge, and her face was the raw pink of 9 miles of night wind. She carried nothing. She had given the child her scarf. I could see it wound 3 times round Pell's neck and knotted at the back where small hands couldn't undo it. Her hands were the thing. She kept them out of her sleeves, and they were in Orchard Hand's hands, brown and cracked across the knuckles, the pads of her fingers shiny with old burn scar from years of smudge fires. Working hands. She stood with them loose at her sides in front of the Alpha King of Ilverheim, and she was not afraid of me. I have been afraid of a great many things. I had forgotten there was a version of me you could simply look at. Sire, she said, and bowed her head and lifted it again. She'd have come alone. Alone. She left at moonrise. Her mother's sick abed, she got the latch up herself. Her breath went out of her, white and slow. Her brother woke and came for me because I keep the fires and I'm awake. We caught her at the 2nd mile. And I tried, sire. I want you to know I tried. I told her the king doesn't want her honey and doesn't want her, and she said she stopped. Say it. The woman looked at me steadily. She said, then why does everyone say he'll come for me? The gate road went very quiet. Somewhere below, the smudge fire hissed as somebody fed it. And I couldn't send her back to her bed with that, she said. So I walked her here to have it out of her. She's been telling me the whole 9 miles what she'd say to you. She said it, I said. She did. I looked down at Pelle Osaway of Calcio, who had got her own latch up in the dark and walked out into a mountain winter at 6 years old to surrender to me. Because in her valley, in my valley, that is what happens to bad children. Everyone says so. Her mother probably says so, over the pot, tired at the end of a long day, the way her mother's mother did. Mind, or the king will come for you. She had believed it enough to go herself, so that I would not have to come. Something went out from under me. Not grief, exactly. It was more like the moment a floor you have walked on for years makes a sound it has never made. Havard. Sire. The guardroom fire, I said. Both of them. Prisoners don't get fires, Pelle said instantly. I said, you're not a prisoner. And she wailed. I want that recorded properly because I have never in my life so completely misread a room. She burst into tears, enormous, furious, hiccuping tears, and she stamped one straw-stuffed boot and shouted at me in my own gate. I stole it. You have to take me or it's for nothing. And then, because 6-year-olds are made of 2 things and both of them are heart, she stopped shouting and turned round and pushed her wet face into the orchard woman's cloak. The woman went down on one knee in the frozen road and gathered her in without a word. Not a fuss, no shushing. She just took the whole weight of her and let her cry into it, and put one cracked hand flat between those small shoulder blades and held it there still, the way you hold a bird. Over the child's head, she looked up at me. She's not being naughty, she said. She's being honest. There's a difference and she's had a hard night. I know the difference. Then help me, she said. Because I've got nothing left to tell her, sire. I've spent it all on the road. Nobody speaks to me like that. It has been years since anyone said help me to my face without the word please wedged in front of it like a shield. And the strange thing, the thing I could not stop turning over afterwards, is that it did not sound like insolence. It sounded like accuracy. She had walked 9 miles and she was out of what she had, and I was the only other adult on the road, so she said so. I crouched again, an arm's length from the 2 of them in the frost, and my guards stood there like fence posts and pretended to be elsewhere. Pelle Osaway. She turned her head just enough to show me one wet eye. Your honey's confiscated, I said. That's the law. You brought it back yourself at night in winter on foot, and that's mitigation. That's a real word. It means the judge has to take it into account, and I'm the judge. The eye widened. So here's my sentence. I laid the sacking down on the road between us. You're bound over. That means you're free, but you're mine now, Ilverheim's, I mean, for the day. You're to go into that guardroom and sit by the fire and eat whatever Havard puts in front of you, and you're to eat all of it, because that's the sentence, and if you don't finish it, you're in contempt. What's contempt? She said thickly. Worse than theft, I said. There was a long, wet, considering silence. Is there bread in it? She said. There's bread in it. She detached herself from the woman's cloak, wiped her whole face with her whole sleeve, and put out her hand to me to be shaken. Formally, straw sticking out of her boots. I shook it, my hand went round hers and passed it. It was sticky. Sire, she said, with enormous dignity, and went off between two of the largest men in my kingdom, both of whom were suddenly very attentive to the ground, which left the woman and me, kneeling in the road like a pair of fools. We stood up at the same time. That was well done, she said. It was late, I said. She didn't argue, that struck me too. Everyone argues with me, it's practically a courtesy. She just looked down the road where the child had gone and let the thing stand. Your name, I said. Mara. She pulled her hood back to say it, and I saw her whole face for the first time, and it was not a beautiful face in the way the court means it. It was better. It was a face that had been outside for most of its life and had decided that was fine. Mara Selk. Selk, I said. Selk, she said. Of Calcio, I keep the smudge fires and I mind the low rose. A pause. You want to know why I let her come? You said. She'd have come alone. That's the reason. It isn't the whole reason. She was looking at me now the way you look at whether you have to walk out into. I've been arguing with that sentence in my valley for 20 years, sire. Mind, or the king will come for you. I say it's a lie every time I hear it. I've said it to mothers with the kettle on, and I've said it to my own brother, and they laugh at me, and they call me the king's fool for it, and they go on saying it because it works. It gets the child to bed. She stopped, and something in her went hard. And this morning it got a child out of bed, she said. So I brought her here to be looked at by the man himself, because I'm done arguing with the shape of you. I wanted her to see there's a man. The wind came up the gate road and moved the smoke, and neither of us moved. And what did she see? I said. A big frightened one, said Mara Selk. I should have had her removed. My father would have. I stood there in the cold, and I felt my mouth do something it has not done at dawn in a long time. Severin, she said, do you want the rest of it, or shall I go and get her home? And there it was. I want to be exact because I have had a great deal of time to be exact about it since. There was no mark, no burning, no sign. My wolves were asleep in the hay above the gatehouse and stayed asleep, Bly and old Torin, who care about very little that is not meat. Nothing sang, nothing pulled. I am not a man things happen to. She simply said my name. Severin. Not sire. Not the king of Ilverheim, which is the version they teach at the same time as prayers. Not the sentence with the threat folded into it. My name, out loud in a woman's plain voice, with a question after it, as though it belonged to a person who might answer. And I stood there, and understood that I had not heard it said that way since I was 22 years old. Everyone else in the world had been saying it at something for 20 years, at a child who wouldn't sleep, at a debt, at a boarder, at a bad harvest. It had stopped being a name somewhere along the way and become a piece of weather. And then a frost-burned orchard hand who had walked all night said it the ordinary way, the way my mother said it, and the whole shape of the morning turned over. The rest of it, I said. My voice came out wrong. She had the courtesy not to notice. Her mother's got the winter cough, the wet kind, and there's no fat in that house and no fire past the second hour. She counted it off without heat, the way you count what a tree needs. The brother's 9 and he's minding it all and he's not sleeping. They've a roof and no wood. And before you ask me why they didn't send word up, sire, they'd sooner die of it. Because of the name. Because of the name, she said. Down at the guardroom door, my captain of 20 years came out backwards, carefully, holding a bowl, saying something over his shoulder in a voice I had never heard him use. You'll want to be getting back, I said. I will. You'll go in the sledge. Both of you. She opened her mouth and I said, Selk, I've just find a child a comb of honey. Don't make me spend the rest of the morning arguing with a grown woman about a horse. Her mouth closed, then faintly it turned up at one corner. "All right," she said. She went down to fetch the child, and I stood in the arch of my own gate and watched her go, and I have no idea how long I did it for. The sky was going the color of the inside of a shell. The smudged smoke lay in the low rows like water. Havard came and stood beside me. He did not say anything for a while, which is how I knew. "Say it, Selk," he said, "of Calcio." I heard her. "Sire," he was looking straight ahead down the slope at the gray trees. "Calcio's low rows. The ones on the shoulder above the river." And the floor made that sound again. I knew the shoulder above the river at Calcio. I know every foot of it. I know it the way you know a thing you did with your own hands on the worst night of your life, when you were 22 years old and the blight was in the wood, and coming up the valley at the speed of a walking man, and there were 3,000 trees and no time and no choice. And I stood there and gave the order and then took the torch myself, because if you're going to do a thing like that you had better be the one holding it. 900 trees in Calcio. I counted them. I have always been able to tell you the number. "Selk," Havard said quietly. Old Selk had the low rows. He had a girl about 13. I stood in my gate and watched the woman who had walked all night to tell me. I was a man come back up the road carrying somebody else's child asleep on her shoulder. The orchard I burned was hers. And for 20 years, in the valley where I burned it, she had been the only soul alive who wouldn't let them make a monster out of me. I did not send the sledge, I drove it. Havard tried to stop me at the stable door and made it as far as "Sire" before he saw my face and gave it up. He put 2 guards on horses behind us anyway, at a distance, because he is a good man, and it is his whole life's work to be ignored politely. The sledge was the low gray one we use for winter feed, and I harnessed Ossik to it myself. Mara Selk watched me do it. She stood by the wall with the child asleep on her shoulder, and she did not offer to help, and she did not say anything about a king buckling his own traces. And when I looked up, she was just watching my hands with the neutral attention of someone who has harnessed a great many things and is checking my work. "Well," I said, "you've got the near strap a hole loose." I did have the near strap a hole loose. I fixed it. "Get in," I said. We put Pell in the middle, wrapped in a fur that had cost more than Calcio earns in a year, and she did not wake once. She had eaten most of a loaf, half a bowl of oats with butter in it, and Havard confessed this to me later, looking at the ceiling, an entire honey cake, on the grounds that the sentence had said whatever Havard puts in front of you. Her mouth was open, there was straw in her hair. The valley road runs down out of Ilverheim in long sweeps through the high rows, and at that hour the frost was still on everything, and the sun came over the eastern shoulder and lit the whole orchard at once, 10,000 bare trees throwing 10,000 blue shadows down the snow. It is the most beautiful thing I own. I have been told this by ambassadors. Mara Selk looked at it, the way you look at a room you grew up in. "You've let the high rows get away from you," she said. "Have I?" "Third block up from the bend. You've not thinned them in 4 years. They're all going to spur wood, and your fires are in the wrong place." She said it flatly, without any of the elaborate cushioning people put round the edges of telling me things. Whoever's laying them is putting them at the row ends because it's easier walking. Smoke wants to sit in the low ground. You want them in the dips. "I'll tell my orchard master." "He knows," she said. "He's just got 200 men and no one to make him." We went a mile without talking. Ossik's breath went up in 2 white ropes. The runners made that sound they make. I had a question in my mouth for the whole of that mile, and I could not find a way to put it down that wasn't a blade. "You knew," I said at last, "at the gate, when I asked your name, you knew what it would mean." "Course I knew." "You watched me not know." "I did," she said, and then without cruelty, "It seemed a poor time, you just find a child." I looked at the road. 900 trees, I said. 940. 941, I said. There was a seedling in the corner by the wall. It wasn't in the ledger. Something went across her face, quick, and gone before I could name it. She turned her head away and looked out at the shadows. That was my father's, she said. He'd put it in for me. It was 2 years old. I had known that. Not the for her part. The rest of it, the wall, the corner, the small unlisted thing standing there in the frost while everything around it went up. I have known it every day for 20 years the way you know a bad tooth. Say what you want to say, she said. I don't have anything to say. I stood on your father's shoulder and burned everything he had, and I have never once thought I was wrong to do it. No, she agreed. You weren't. I had my mouth open for the next sentence, and it stopped there. She still wasn't looking at me. Her hand was moving, slowly, up and down the sleeping child's back, without her attending to it at all. The blight was in the wood, she said. It goes down the root. You can't cut it out, you can't spray it out, and by the time you can see it in the leaf, it's already 3 rows past where you're standing. My father knew that better than you did. He'd seen it in the East when he was a lad. He knew what you'd have to do about 8 days before you came. She let out a breath. He just couldn't be the one to say it. He fought me, I said. He stood in the gate with a scythe. Yes, said Mariselk. He was 56 and it was his whole life. What did you want him to do? Hold the torch for you? I don't know what I wanted him to do. Well then, she shifted the child's weight. You did the right thing badly, sire, that's all. You were 22. You came up the road with 200 men and you burned a valley in a night and you never came back and never sent a word. And so we sat in the ash all winter with nothing but the shape of you. I began and stopped, because I knew exactly what I had sent. I had sent money. It went out from the treasury in the spring with a clerk's seal on it and a schedule of replanting, and I remember signing it, and I remember the enormous relief of signing it, and I have not thought about it in 15 years. You sent silver, she said. It came in March, it was fair. It was more than fair, actually. I've seen the ledger. The crown paid Cauldshaw better than it paid Ardenmore, and Ardenmore only lost 60 trees. She almost laughed. And do you know what it did? It made us rich for 1 year, and it made you a monster for 20. Because a man who comes and burns you and then goes away and sends money is not a man, sire. He's a weather. You can't be angry at weather. So they made you into a thing instead. The sun came over and hit the side of her face. The frost burn on her cheeks, the old shine of the smudged scars on her fingers. They made you into the thing that comes in the night and takes what's yours if you've been bad, she said. And Caulshaw's been saying it to its children ever since. And I have been standing in kitchens for 20 years saying, no, he doesn't. He's a man, I've seen him, and they laugh at me. And they say Mariselk's soft on the king who burned her own father's rose, and they go on saying it. Because it works, sire. That's the terrible part. It gets the child to bed. I had the reins in my hands, and I did not feel them. Why, I said. Why what? You watch me do it. From where? The wall, she said. By the seedling. I was 13 and nobody was minding me. Then why? I said, and it came out of me harder than I meant, hard enough that Pell stirred and settled. I brought it down. Selk, you of all people, you had the best reason in that whole valley to let them make me a monster. You'd have been right. Why have you spent 20 years arguing with your own kitchen about the man who burned your father's orchard? She was quiet long enough that I thought she wouldn't. Because I saw your face, she said. I turned my head. You didn't know I was there. Nobody did. She was looking straight down the road now, and her voice had gone very even, the way a voice goes when it is carrying something. You gave the order and your men wouldn't move. They stood there, 200 grown men with torches, and not one of them would go first. And you stood in front of my father's gate with the whole valley watching, and you took the torch off the nearest one and you went and did it yourself. The first row, on your own. That was practicality, I said. They'd have taken all night. That's what I thought at 13, she said. I thought, he's cold, he's doing it because it's quick. And then you came back down the row and I was up on the wall about 8 feet from you and you couldn't see me because the fire was in your eyes and you stopped. She stopped too. And you were crying, sire. The runners went on making their noise. You put your hand out on the wall to hold yourself up, she said, about a foot from my foot, and you stood there and you cried like a boy, for about as long as it takes to count 10. And then you wiped your face and you went and gave the next order in a perfectly steady voice, and you did that all night, and at dawn you rode away. She let that sit. I have never told anyone that, she said. Not my father, not once, not in 20 years. Why not? Because it was yours, she said simply. You'd gone off somewhere to have it where nobody could see. It wasn't mine to hand round the valley. She shrugged, and the sleeping child went up and down. But I knew after that there was a man in there. So when they started making you into a story, I couldn't hold my tongue. It's not loyalty, sire, if that's what you're fishing for. It's just that I know and they don't, and I'm not able to sit still in a room where people are wrong. I've been given a great many things in 20 years. Cities have given me keys. Kessendrel gave me a sword that had killed a king. My council gives me, every winter, a report on the granaries and a look. Nobody had ever given me back a night I had thought I got away with. Selk, I said, my voice was not right. Mara. Oh. And I could not find the end of the sentence. It was not there. I sat on the box of my own sledge with the reins slack in my hands and the whole eastern light coming up over the shoulder of the mountain. And I understood, with the clean, cold shock of a man stepping into a river, that this woman had been carrying the only true account of me that existed in the world, alone, for 20 years, at the cost of being laughed at in every kitchen in her valley, and had never once thought of coming up the hill to tell me about it. She had not come to be thanked. She had come this morning because a 6-year-old got the latch up. You'd never have told me either, I said. No. You'd have gone your whole life. I'd have gone my whole life, she agreed, and then she looked round at me at last, and her frost-raw face did something that took the ground out from under me entirely. It was not reverence. It was worse. It was the ordinary, unimpressed, slightly amused look of one person considering another one. Severin, what would you have wanted me to do with it? Walk up to the gate and say, sire, I watched you cry once, mind how you go. There it was again. My name, just lying there in the middle of a sentence like a stone in a road being a name. I have thought about this a great deal since, and I am going to set it down as plainly as I can, because it is the whole of it. I have been Severin Malth for 42 years. For the first 22 I was a person. Then I burned a valley and became a piece of weather, and the name went with me out into the kingdom, into the kitchens, into the dark over the beds of children, until it stopped meaning a man and started meaning what happens if you're bad. It came back to me every day of my life, off the lips of ambassadors and clerks and my own captain, and every single time it had that other thing wrapped round it. Even the love had it, especially the love. And then a woman said it while asking me a question about a sledge. That is all. There was no burning. There was no mark. My wolves stayed home in the hay above the gatehouse and slept through the entire thing, being 2 elderly and profoundly unmystical animals whose great passion is fat. Nothing in the world moved except me. And I could not hear anything else after that. That was the trouble. She said it once at the gate and once on the road, and for the rest of my life every other version of my name has sounded like a coat that doesn't fit. You've gone quiet, she said. You said my name, I said. She frowned. I've been saying it wrong all morning then. Havard's been giving me a look. No, I said, say it again. She did not say it again. She looked at me for a long, level moment, long enough that I heard exactly how the sentence had come out of me and would have given a duchy to have it back. And then she turned and faced front and said, to the road, you want to mind the bend. It's ice under that. It was, I minded it. We came down into Calcio at the 9th hour. I had not been back. I want that on the record without decoration. I had not set foot in that valley in 20 years, and I had built the not going into my life so completely that I had a dozen good reasons for it, all of them true, none of them the reason. It is a narrow place. The river runs black down the middle of it, and the houses stand along the north bank with their backs to the wind, and the rows go up the shoulder in terraces, one above the next, all the way to the tree line. The new wood was up, 20 years of it. They were young trees still by orchard reckoning, thin-trunked, well-kept, in good straight lines, and they went up that whole shoulder in the winter light, 941 of them and more, and I sat on the box of the sledge and looked at them and could not get any air in. "They're bearing," Mara said. "For a year now, it's good fruit. Sharp, it's a cold shoulder, they're late, but it makes the best cider in Ilverhame, and I'll fight the man who says otherwise." "Who planted them?" "Everyone," she said, "that spring with your silver." And then before I could do anything with that, she said, "There, by the wall corner." I looked. There was an apple tree in the corner by the wall. It was not like the others. It was 22 years old, and it had grown up crooked and low and enormous, the way a tree does when it has nothing on either side of it, and its branches came down and out in a great black wheel over the snow. "It didn't burn," I said. "It burned," she said. "It burned to the ground, sire. I watched it go. It came back from the root the next spring. That's what they do sometimes if the root's clean." She was looking at it, and her voice had gone flat and careful in the way I was learning meant the opposite. "My father lived 4 years after. He got to see it fruit." Pell woke up. She woke the way children do, all at once and entirely, and sat up in the fur and looked around at her own valley with her mouth open. And then she looked at me, sitting there driving. "Is this still the sentence?" she said. "This is still the sentence," I said. "I'm delivering you, that's part of it." "Oh," she said, deeply satisfied, and then wore my boots and burrowed down to find them. There were people in the road. Not many. It was mid-morning, and it is a small place, and half of them were out in the rows. But the sledge had come down off the King's Road with the crown on the side of it, and by the time we came along the north bank, there were maybe 30 of them standing out in the frost in front of their own doors. An old man, 2 women with buckets, a knot of children, a man with an axe in his hand and no idea he was still holding it. They saw the sledge, then they saw who was driving it. I have ridden into cities that were trying to kill me, and had a better welcome. It was not hatred. I could have done something with hatred. It was that every single person in that road went absolutely still, and every mother's hand came out and found a child, and they all did the same thing at the same time without one word passing between them. They took a step back and put themselves between their children and me. 30 people, one motion, 20 years of practice. Mara Selk made a small sound beside me. And Pell Osaway of Calcho stood straight up in the sledge in her straw-stuffed boots, holding onto my arm for balance, and shouted down the road at her entire valley, "It's all right. I'm bound over." Nobody moved. "I stole the honey," she bellowed, with the ringing scorn of the very young for the very slow. "And I went and I told him, and he fined me, and there was bread in it, and this is Severin, and he's just a man." The road stayed exactly where it was. Then the door of the third house came open, and a woman came out of it in a shawl, gray-faced, with the cough on her, and her 9-year-old boy holding her up by the elbow, and she got 2 steps into the frost and saw the sledge and her daughter standing up in it with her hand on the King's arm, and her legs went. Mara was off the box before I had the reins wrapped. She got there first. She got an arm under her, and the boy took the other side, and I sat there. I sat there on my own sledge like a stone, and watched an orchard hand hold a sick woman up in the road because the King had come to the valley and nobody could move. Then Mara Selk turned her head and looked back at me over her shoulder, still holding the woman up, with her hair coming out of her hood and her breath going white, and she said it. Loud. down the whole length of that road so that every soul in Calcio heard her do it. Severin, come and help me carry her. I have been obeyed my whole life. I had never been used before. I got down off the box and I walked up that road, and 30 people watched the thing that comes in the night and takes what's yours take the weight of Anna Ossaway's shoulder and carry her into her own fire. Somebody said behind me, in a whisper you could have heard in Ardenmoor, she called him Severin. And Mara Selk said, not even turning round, that's his name. The Ossaway house had a roof, a floor, 4 walls, a bed, a table, 2 stools, and a fire the size of my hand. That is the whole inventory. I stood in the middle of it with my head 3 inches off the beam, and I counted it in one look, because I have spent 20 years reading granary reports, and I know what a number looks like when it is lying to me. The Crown says Calcio is solvent. Calcio is solvent. The ledger in the room did not agree, and the room was right. We got Anna Ossaway into the bed. She was fighting us the whole way not to cough us, because the King of Ilverhame had his hand under her arm and she was trying, with the last of what she had, to apologize to me for it. Sire, sire, the house isn't lie down. We'd have swept if we'd— Anna, said Mara, in a voice that shut the whole thing like a door. Lie down and stop shaming your own hospitality in front of the king. It's a good house and it's cold and that's it. The woman lay down. She lay looking at the ceiling with her eyes wet and her jaw set, and her son stood at the foot of the bed with his hands behind his back like a soldier, 9 years old, having held all of this together for 11 days by himself. Corey, I said. He nodded once. He had not blinked since the road. Corey, where's the wood? He looked at his mother. She said to the ceiling, there's wood. There's wood for tonight, Mara said. It's under the eave, it's about 11 sticks. Mara, he's asked Anna. What do you want me to do, lie to him about 11 sticks? She was already unpinning her cloak, already moving, already the only person in that house doing anything useful. It's not shameful, it's February. The whole north banks down to Styx, and the king's men take the deadfall out of the river wood in autumn because it's crown wood, and it goes up to the castle for the cider halls. And nobody's ever said a word about it because nobody's ever going to say a word to you, sire, about anything ever as long as they live. She said it flat, on the way past me, hanging her cloak on a nail. She was not making a speech. She was answering a question. I stood in that cold room and had the worst minute of my adult life, not the burning. I have made my peace with the burning. I was right, I did it myself. I cried on a wall and got up. This was different. This was a house 11 sticks from the end of a February, 4 miles from a castle with 300 cords under cover, and the reason those 2 facts had never met was not cruelty and not policy and not a bad clerk. The reason was that I frightened them. They would sooner die of it. She had told me that on the road in the frost, and I had heard it the way you hear a phrase, and now I was standing in the fact. Corey, I said, is there an axe? He looked at his mother again. Boy, I said, I'm not asking you as the king. I'm asking you because I'm the biggest man in this house and I'm standing here doing nothing. Something in the child's face came apart very slightly. It's blunt, he said. His voice hadn't broken yet. I can't— He stopped and started again, furious. I can't get it sharp. I've tried. I've done it 4 times. Show me, I said. I spent the rest of that morning in the yard behind the Ossaway house in my shirt with a 9-year-old holding the stone, sharpening a bad axe and then splitting everything that would burn within 40 feet of that door. Fence rail. A broken stool. The deadfall from the bank, which is crown wood, which I own, which is mine, which I have never once thought about in my life. Corey Ossaway stacked it. He worked like a man twice his age, and he did not say one word for an hour and a half, and then, somewhere around the 4th armful, without looking at me, he said, Is she really bound over? She really is. Does it hurt? I stopped with the axe up. No, I said. Corey, look at me. No. It's a word for the judge decided you're free. He nodded. He went on stacking, and then he said in exactly the same flat voice, I told her you'd take her hands off. The axe came down slowly. She wouldn't stop crying about the honey, he said. It was midnight. I wanted her to stop, so I said if she went up there you'd take her hands off, and she went quiet and I went asleep. He put the last piece on the stack, very square, very neat. And then she went. He was 9. He had been minding a sick mother for 11 days, and he had said the thing that everyone in his valley says, the thing his mother says, the thing her mother said, because it works, because it gets the child quiet. And then he had woken up at moonrise and found the latch up and the door open and his sister gone into the mountain. He stood there in the frost waiting for me to do whatever the king of Ilverheim does about that. I went down on my heels in the wood chips so my head was under his. "Corey Osaway," I said, "look at my hands." He looked at them. "The king's hands," I said. "They've been the king's hands for 20 years, and in all that time they have never taken anything off a child. Not once, not ever, and they never will. And I want you to remember you saw them close up on the day they were sharpening your axe." He looked at them for a long time, then he said, "You've got a splinter." "I have." "There's tweezers inside," he said, and picked up the last of the wood and went in, and that is how Corey Osaway and I became friends, and I have never had a harder one. I came in with my sleeves rolled and my hands black, and the fire in that house was going like a furnace, and Pell was asleep again. She had lasted about 9 minutes past her own triumph, and Anna Osaway was propped up on every cushion in Caldshow with a cup in her hands. And Mara Selk was standing at the table with her back to me, chopping onions with the neat murderous speed of a woman who has done it 10,000 times. Anna said, "Sire," and I said, "If you apologize to me one more time I'll fine you." And she made a sound that turned into a cough that turned at the end into a laugh, the first laugh in that house in 11 days. I heard it happen. Mara did not turn round, but her shoulders came down about an inch and she said to the onions, "There's a stool." I sat on the stool. The king of Ilverheim sat on a stool in a 2-room house on the north bank of Caldshow with a splinter in his palm and ate an onion and barley soup made from other people's stores. And it was the best meal of my life, and I am aware of exactly how that sentence sounds. Then somebody knocked and it started. They came in ones, then in threes. By the second hour there were perhaps 40 people in the road outside the Osaway house, standing about in the frost with their hands in their sleeves, not coming and not going, because the king was inside and nobody in 20 years had ever worked out a procedure for that. I went out to them. There was nothing else to do. The room had nowhere left to put me. I came out of that low door and straightened up in front of my own valley, and the whole road went still in exactly the way it had gone still at 9 o'clock, the step back, the hand out, the child gathered. They had already stopped doing it consciously. It was in the body now like a limp. I have addressed armies. I know how to stand. "I'm not here for anything," I said. Nobody believed me. Why would they? 40 faces looked back at me and did the arithmetic every one of them had been taught at the same time as their prayers. "He's come down out of the mountain, so what's it for?" An old man near the back said, out loud without meaning to, "It's the honey." "It's not the honey," I said. "The honey's settled." The girl came up and gave it back. "Then what's it for?" someone said, and there was a crack in it, and I saw a woman near the front holding a boy of about 4 by the shoulders so hard that the child was up on his toes. And I understood what I was going to have to do, and I understood that it was going to be the hardest thing I had ever done standing up. "It's for this," I said. "What you're doing now. What every one of you did in this road at 9 o'clock this morning." I wanted to stop and I don't know how to make it stop. Silence. "You tell your children I'll come for them," I said. 40 people did not move. Behind me in the doorway I heard Mara Selk come out and stop. "He told them for 20 years. Mind or the king will come for you. Your mother's told you. You tell your boys." "It works. I know it works. I know exactly why you do it. It's the end of a long day and the child won't go to bed, and it's the only thing left that shuts the room." My voice was not doing what I told it. I let it. And this morning it got a 6-year-old out of her bed at moonrise and put her on my mountain in the dark, alone in February, to hand herself in. 9 miles. She'd have gone up that road and died in the drifts at the second bend, and none of you would ever have known why. The woman at the front let go of the boy's shoulders. "She lived because Mara Selk was awake and keeping fires," I said. "That's all. That's the whole of it. Your valley nearly buried a child in a snowdrift because of a sentence you say about me, and I've come down here to ask you to stop saying it. Nothing." 40 faces, 40 separate calculations. Then a man in the middle, big, red-bearded, an axe still in his belt from the morning, said, "You burned us." "I did." The road took a breath. "You came in the night with 200 men," he said. He was shaking. He was doing the bravest thing anyone in that valley had done in 20 years, and his voice was shaking like a boy's. "You burned 900 trees, my father's rose. You burned Selk's whole shoulder with him standing in the gate. And then you went away, sire, and you never came back, and you never sent a word." "Ret," Mara said. "And now you stand in our road and ask us to tell our children you're kind." "No," I said. He stopped. "Not asking you to tell them I'm kind," I said. "I burned this valley and I'd do it again tomorrow, and if I told you otherwise you'd be right never to believe another word out of me. The blight was in the root. It was 8 days from Ardenmoor and 40 from the whole of Ilverheim, and there was nothing else, and your fathers knew it, and that is why they only fought me with one scythe." Somewhere in the crowd an old woman said, very quietly, "That's true." "I'm not asking you to say I'm kind," I said. "I'm asking you to say I'm a man." The wind came down the valley and moved the smoke off the river. "Tell them the king burned Cauldshaw, and it was right, and it was terrible, and he cried doing it," I said. "And I heard the whole road hear that, and I did not stop. Tell them he sent Silver in the spring because he couldn't make himself come back and look at you, and that was cowardice, and it cost you 20 years. Tell them he's 4 miles up that hill with 300 cords of wood under cover, and Anna Ossaway is 11 sticks from the end of February, and nobody told him because you'd sooner die of it. Tell them all of that. Tell them he's a fool and a coward and he ruined your fathers. I'll sign it." Ret Bramley stood there with his mouth open. "Just stop telling them I come in the night," I said, "because they believe you. And they'll go." Nobody said anything at all, and I stood there in front of 40 people and felt the thing I have spent my whole reign not feeling, which is the exact, specific, bottomless helplessness of a man who has absolute power and has just asked for the only thing it cannot get him. I can raise a levy. I can hang a man. I can order a road built through a mountain and it will be built. I cannot walk into a kitchen at the end of a long day and stop a tired woman from saying the one sentence that works. They were going to say it anyway. I could see it. They were standing in that road looking at a large, frightening man who had just told them at length that he had burned their valley and was too much of a coward to come back. And every mother in that crowd was going to go home and put a child to bed tonight, and it was going to be dark, and she was going to be tired. I had nothing. I had never had less. And then I turned my head and looked at Mara Selk in the doorway, because there was nowhere else to look. She had her arms folded. She looked back at me with that same level, unimpressed, entirely accurate attention, and she did not move a muscle to help me. Help me, I thought. You've been arguing for 20 years. Say it. They'll take it from you. They won't take it from me, they can't. I'm the shape at the end of the road, but you're theirs. One word from you and this road turns. She saw all of that go across my face. I know she did. She read it the way she reads a tree, and she stood in that doorway with her arms folded, and she said out loud to the whole valley, "Don't look at me, sire." The road went absolutely silent. "You want me to hand it to you," she said. Mara Selk stands up and says he's all right. I've always said he's all right, and they all go, "Ah well, if Mara says no." Her chin came up. They've laughed at me for 20 years for saying it. Every kitchen on this bank. Soft on the king who burned her own father. Ret's called me it to my face at his own table with his own bread in my hand. Ret Bramley went the color of his beard. "So I'm not spending it on you," she said. "It's not worth anything anyway. I'm the fool, that's the whole point of me. And if this road turns because I said so, it turns back the day I'm wrong about something." "Then what do?" I said. I said it in front of 40 people. I did not care. I have replayed it 1,000 times and I would not take it back. Mara Selk came off the step. "You come back," she said. "That's all. That's the whole of it, and you're not going to like it because it isn't a decree and it isn't silver and it can't be done by Thursday." She was in the middle of the road now, in front of all of them in her shirt sleeves in February. 20 years of not coming made you a monster. It'll take 20 years of coming to make you a man. You come down here in the spring and you look at the low rose and you argue with Ret about his thinning, because he's wrong about his thinning. "I am not," said Ret Bramley, on pure reflex, and half the road made a noise. And you come at the cider pressing and you drink it and you say honestly whether it's good. And you come when someone dies. Sire, that's the one. You come when someone dies, and you stand in the back and you get rained on like everybody else. And in about 10 years, there'll be a woman in a kitchen with a child who won't go to bed, and she'll open her mouth to say the sentence and it'll sound stupid to her. Because she'll have seen you getting rained on. She turned round and looked at her whole valley. That's what he's asking, she said. He's not asking you to like him. He's asking for 20 years. And I'd not give it to him either if I were you, but I'd not lie about him either, and there's a difference, and it's the only bit I've ever asked for. Then she looked back at me, and her mouth went up at one corner, and she said, in front of all of them, Severin, there's wood on that hill, and there's a woman in that house with 11 sticks. Start with that. It's 4 miles. And Rhett Bramley said hoarsely, I've got a cart. We got 12 cords down that bank before dark. Rhett's cart and Havard's 2 horses, and about 30 people from the North Bank who did not say a single word to me for the first 3 trips, and by the 5th were arguing with me about how to stack it. It is not a reconciliation. I want to be honest, because she has made honesty extremely difficult to get out of. It was wood. Nobody forgave anybody. Rhett Bramley looked at me all afternoon the way you look at weather that has come indoors. But at the 4th trip, coming back up the empty road with the cart bouncing, he said, not to me, to the horse, it's a cold shoulder, that's all. That's why we're late. The fruit's better for it. Selk says it's the best cider in Ilverhame, I said. Well, said Rhett Bramley. At dusk I went up to the wall. The corner tree stood in the snow with its great black wheel of branches. 22 years old and burned to the ground once and come back from a clean root. Crooked and low and enormous, and no straight row would ever have let it grow like that. Mara came up and stood beside me. Neither of us said anything for a while. That is a thing I had never done with another person in my life. I'm going to make an error, I said. Probably. I'm going to offer you something. I know, she said. I've been watching it coming up the hill all afternoon. There's a place at Ilverhame. Orchard master under Vesson or over him, I don't care, you're right. He's got no one to make him. The high rows are going to spur wood, and my fires are at the row ends because it's easier walking. I could not look at her. It's real. It isn't a kindness. You'd be worth 4 of him, and I'd have offered it to you at the gate this morning if I'd had the sense. And it's not what I want to offer you, I said, and you know it, and I'm not going to hide behind the orchard because you've had 20 years of me being a coward about a much smaller thing. The tree ticked in the cold. Say it then, said Mara Selk. The only person alive who says my name, I said. That's all. I know exactly how small that sounds. Every soul in this kingdom says it, and every one of them is saying something else. And this morning you said it in a road while asking me to carry a woman, and I have not been able to hear anything since. 42 years old. I didn't know it was gone until you handed it back. She was quiet. Not asking you to answer, I said. I burned your father's rose. You watch from this wall. If it's no, it's right, and I'll still be at the pressing, and I'll still get rained on. She let out a long breath, white in the dark. Severin Mouth, she said. I've been telling the truth about you in kitchens for 20 years and getting laughed at for it, and I've never once wanted anything for it, and I want you to understand that I'm about to be extremely annoyed with myself. I turned my head. Ask me in the spring, she said. In this corner, when it's in leaf. That's 4 months. You've had 20 years, said Mara Selk. Have 4 months. And then she put out her hand, her cracked, brown, smudge-scarred hand, and laid it flat on the black bark of her father's tree, the one the fire took and the root gave back. And after a moment I put mine beside it, and we stood there in the dark like 2 people at a gate. And that was all, and it was enough, and it was more than I have ever been given. I stayed in Cauldshaw that night. Havard nearly resigned. I slept on the floor of the Bramleys, which is a story of its own, and I got up before the light because I have not slept past dawn since I was 22, and I went out into the road to look at the shoulder in the frost, and coming past the 3rd house I heard a child crying. I stopped. It was that endless grinding 2 in the morning wail, the one that has no bottom to it, and it was Pell Ossaway, and she had got herself into a state about something, the honey, the boots, the king 9 miles, all of it, arriving at once the way it does. And through the shutter I heard Anna Osaway hoarse at the absolute end of herself, at the end of the longest 11 days of her life, say, Pell, Pell, mind or the and stop. I stood in the frost outside that shutter and I did not breathe. There was a long silence in that house. Then Anna Osaway said, quite differently, in a voice I could barely hear, "Or you'll wake him. He's asleep at Bramley's. He's had a long day and he's only a man and he's tired, love. Go to sleep." And Pell Osaway said thickly, "Is he really?" "Aye," said her mother. "He carried me in, go to sleep." And she did. I stood outside that shutter in the dark until my hands went numb, and then I walked up to the wall and sat down under the crooked tree and watched the light come up the shoulder over 941 trees that a whole valley planted with my money because they were too frightened to tell me they were cold. 20 years, she said. 16 to go. I can wait. I have 4 months first.